Today on Trucks, we'll turn our attention to the business end of Project Harry Hauler by bolting on a 4-bar suspension and extra stout rear end as we continue to get our hauler ready for the street and the strip. After that, we'll show you a dandy sedan delivery that used to bring home the bread. Then we'll take you off-road with some tire tech. That's all today on Trucks.
Hey everybody, welcome to another week of Trucks. A few weeks ago we introduced you to Project Harry Hauler by installing a brand new state-of-the-art front suspension from Heights. This week we're going to turn our attention to the rear of our 34 International so we can not only run it down the road but also be able to put some serious horsepower to it without breaking things.
Now obviously if we're going to put in a new rear end we got to get rid of this old bed. But before we do, we need to take some proper measurements so we know where that new axle is going to go when we put it in. Now, if you don't take the time to do this, you could end up with a truck that's stance is all wrong.
While Stacey's taking the measurements, I can go ahead and knock the bolts off the bed. Now, the good news here is there's only 4, unlike your late model trucks. The bad news is, on something this old, it's definitely going to be rusted out.
Now one of the cool things about this old International, it's got this unique filler panel that sits below the cab. And our new 4-bar system will tuck right in behind it. Unfortunately, it's in the way right now. So I cut it in half and I'll weld it together later on. Now you're probably wondering why I didn't just lift up the cab and pull out the whole piece. Well, the reason is, never try to pick up an old cab like this until it's properly stressed, or the cab could collapse on you. Now we can take the bed off.
Oh yeah!
It's heavier than you thought, isn't it?
Oh man!
You been taking your vitamins?
I guess I'll need to. Now our frame is in pretty good shape, but this is where you need to check for serious rust, especially around the cross members. Now if you find any, this is the time to weld in some new metal. But as you can see, all we've got is some surface rust.
Now here's where all those measurements become real important. We've got a 4-inch drop in the front, we're going to go the same amount in the rear. Now originally we measured from the frame down to the axle. Now we'll just subtract 4 inches from that measurement when we put the new axle in. Also, to keep the wheelbase the same, I'm going to find the axle center line using this plumb bob.
There's no doubt we need to get rid of these old lever action shocks as well as the cables. But the first thing we're going to do is lose the old gas tank. Now keep in mind, on some of these old vintage trucks, the parts can be worth their weight in gold. So whatever you do, don't toss them because you can put some extra cash in your pockets, which is always great for major projects like this.
Now with the rear of the truck supported on jack stands, I've unbolted the rear end. I'll get Mel to help me roll this mess out of here.
Let's do it.
Oh, look at that.
Prehistoric dog, man.
The last thing we need to do is cut these stock spring brackets off the frame to make room for the new hardware.
Speaking of new hardware, since you're probably dying to know what we're going to hang on our Harry Hauler at this point, we'll go ahead and show you. We're going to use a universal 4-bar system from Total Cost Involved. It comes complete with polished stainless 4 bars, the axle and frame brackets, cross member as well as the pannered bar, and we're going to run coilover shocks on this setup.
Now for the axle, we're going to go with this really cool 9-inch housing with an aluminum center section and these 31 spline axles that we got from Curry Enterprises. Now, I know you're thinking, aluminum housing, that's going to be weak as heck. Well, the way they've designed this webbing makes it almost as strong as steel. Now for the third member, we went to Ryder Racing Gears and got their aluminum center chunk to go with the housing. We had them pack it with a 350 gear and a Detroit locker.
Now we can set the housing in place. We're going to use a floor jack so we can get it centered and be able to move it around at the same time. Now in the past, whenever you tried to install a 4-bar, you'd have to chase it all over the garage until my partner Stacey here came up with a really trick little idea that helps keep everything right where you want it.
Yeah, all you need to do is cut down some 2x4s, notch them for the axle tubes, and then line up your axle centerline marks. Then clamp them to the frame at the new ride height that you got from your measurements.
While Stace goes down to get a patent on that little trick, I need to make sure the axle is snug in the cradle. This is also where you need to make sure it's centered front and rear and side to side. Again, this is where those measurements you took earlier are really critical.
With the housing in place, we can clamp on the front frame bracket. Now I'm going to use these bars to make sure that I have the proper distance between the axle and the front bracket. Now you may have noticed that I've unscrewed these ends about a ½ inch. That'll make sure we have plenty of adjustment for our pinion angle later on. After that, we can bolt the bars to the axle bracket and get them into place. Now while I hold on to it, I'll have Mel tap that front bracket till everything is plumb and true. Double check all your measurements, don't forget your pinion angle, and weld everything in.
Now it's time to bolt in our new center chunk. Now, like Stace told you before, we're going to run a 350 gear, but whatever you choose, this is where you need to do your homework, because you need to make sure the gear works with your rear tire height, the gear ratio of your transmission, as well as your engine's RPM range. Once you have all that information, all you have to do is call Ryder Racing, and they'll help you choose the right ratio based on what you're going to put your truck through.
Since this kit we got from TCI is universal, we did have to do some modifications, like lengthening this rear cross member by welding in this center piece so it'll fit between the frame rails. Now this rear cross member goes behind the axle and slides into the frame rail and basically holds all the weight that we're going to put in the Harry hauler, so it needs to be strong.
The link that connects the cross member and the axle are these coilover shocks. We're going to mount ours to the center hole on the axle, which will give us an adjustment of about 1 inch up or down. Remember, shocks should never be tilted more than 25 degrees or they just won't work properly.
Now that we have the suspension installed, we can pull out these 2x4 blocks and see what we got. Tell you what, Mel, this is looking good.
Now we can start putting it together.
That's right.
But before we do, we need to pay for all this stuff. Don't go away. We got more trucks for you right after this. This thing is stout.
This is great.
Later on Trucks, we'll show you a 1951 sedan that became one dandy delivery. But before we do, the guys need to finish upgrading the rear end on Project Harry Hauler. Just can't get enough of trucks? Check us out online at truckstv.com.
Thanks for staying with us, everybody. As you can see, we're right in the middle of putting a 4-bar suspension on Project Harry Hauler. And since the kit we got from TCI comes with a brand new cross member, we went ahead and cut out the stock one.
Now for you guys that aren't familiar with the 4-bar setup or its benefits, check this out. Not only are they fully adjustable, but by using 2 parallel bars, they allow the rear end to stay exactly where it's supposed to through its full range of motion. Now with a leaf spring or even a ladder bar setup that has a single mount in the front, the rear end will pivot. Also, with a leaf spring setup, you always have to deal with axle wrap. That's totally eliminated with a 4-bar setup.
Well, if you haven't figured it out yet, our old International is being built for speed as well as classic looks. And since some serious horsepower is going to motivate the Harry Hauler, we need to be able to count on the reins we're going to be pulling in. Now, since we're going with Wilwood on the front, we're also going to use their rear disc brake setup. They come with these cool polished calipers, mounting brackets, a 2-piece hub with every bolt pattern you can imagine, and of course these little bitty dudes are for the parking brake.
Like Mel was saying before, we're going to be running in the ballpark of about 600 horsepower out of this truck. And that's going to be turning some big old fat balonies here in the rear. Now a 28 spline axle would not be strong enough. A 35 spline axle, well, that's a little overkill and you start to get limited on what you can do in the differential. That's why we're going with these 31 spline axles that we got from Curry Enterprises. Just slide them in. Don't forget your bracket for your disc brakes. And bolt them down.
Now we can put the woe to our go. First thing we had to do was bolt the hub to the rotor before we could slide it onto the axle. Now we can take the caliper and bolt it up to the mounting bracket. Then you can slide the pads into place. Finally, we can mount the little mechanical caliper for the parking brake.
Now I told you before about the benefits of a 4-bar system. One of the things you don't get with leaf springs is a panhard bar. Now, leaf springs not only give you your spring rate, but they also keep the axle from moving from side to side. Now, obviously, 4 bars are not going to do that. And that's why you've got to have a panhard bar. It not only centers the rear end, but eliminates side-to-side movement. Now, one side of the bar bolts to the rear end. The other comes over here to the opposite side frame rail. Now, obviously, we're going to have to wait to do this because we need to box this frame in so we have a place to mount our bracket. Also, when you're setting up a panhard bar, it needs to sit level when the vehicle is at ride height.
Now it's time for the moment of truth. Now, we already told you about some big old fat balonies we're going to run on the rear of the Harry Hauler, and here they are. The Mickey Thompson Sportsman is not only a great street tire, but it's also going to give you plenty of grip on the strip. And since we're going with the 10-spoke ETs on the front, we decided to put Team 3's matching 5-spoke ETs on the rear.
Finally, we get to see the stance of this monster.
Tell you what, Stace, this is really starting to look awesome.
We're not done yet.
What do you mean?
I figure that since there's a good chance that we're going to pull the front end up off the ground, we need to put on these wheelie bars from Moroso.
Buddy, now you're talking.
These bars are fully adjustable so you can adjust the height of your wheelies. They're also spring-loaded so you don't end up breaking something. But the best part is, once you weld them to the axle, you can unbolt them so you can take them off anytime you want.
I don't think there's a whole lot more to say besides don't go away. We'll be right back. That is cool.
Aren't these evil? This is great.
Up next on Trucks, we got that dandy delivery to show you from 1951. And if you're into off-roading, you definitely won't want to miss the tire tech tips Mel and Stacey have for you. That's coming up later in the show. For more information about trucks, check us out online at truckstv.com.
Welcome back, everybody. You know, we deal with a lot of really unique vehicles on this show, and since we're all about anything with wheels on it that's not a car, there was no way we could pass on this 1951 sedan delivery owned by Roger Metzger of Spring Hill, Tennessee.
Now, this is what we call a mild custom, which means it's had some subtle modifications to smooth out the body, but it still has enough chrome to keep the original appeal. As you can see, the headlight rings have been welded to the fenders to give the lights a Frenched-in look. The hood has been smoothed and 4 rows of louvers have been punched in. Very cool.
The suspension on this delivery is a Mustang II independent in the front with a 9-inch Ford in the rear. And for you history buffs, those wheels are original Kelsey Hayes wire spokes that have been totally refurbished.
Under the hood lurks a 350 small block that's backed by a 350 turbo tranny and has all the goodies like power steering, headers, and a lumpy cam. And since this truck is a daily driver, power front disc brakes are a must.
Another custom touch are the shaved door handles that have been replaced with Von Dutch style pinstriping. Once inside, you see just enough chrome to hint at the 50s era, but enough modern upgrades like the door panels, carpet, and bucket seats to make it a nice vehicle to drive on a daily basis.
Now, this sunburnt orange sedan was originally an all-white bread truck that kept the local supermarkets well stocked. Of course, that was back in '51 when it was stock. Now that it's been customized with velour side panels and headliner, the only thing it'll be delivering is a glimpse of what used to be and a cushy ride for whatever or whoever you put back here.
For years, the sedan delivery was used by everyone from plumbers to florists, but that was until people started to realize how cool they could be customized. Part wagon, part van, or part truck, however you want to look at it, we think it's a dandy delivery.
Up next on Trucks, the guys are coming right at you with some tire tech tips that'll help you get the most out of your off-roading experience. If you want more trucks, check us out online at truckstv.com.
Welcome back to the Truck Shop, everybody. You know, there's so many options out there when it comes to big off-road tires that we thought we'd give you a few tips on what to look for If you're after a big tire just for the look of it, which is valid, or if you're going to do some serious off-roading.
Now in the past, getting the right tire size has always been a major headache because you pretty much had to buy them to see if they'd even fit. But these days, you can call up a mail order company that can deliver a wheel and tire combination that's already balanced and guaranteed to fit.
The first thing you need to decide is what you're going to use your vehicle for, and it's real important to be honest with yourself here, because you don't want to be driving down the road with something that's too aggressive. And the reason is the compound is usually softer, and that means quicker wear, and not to mention you won't be able to hear yourself think. On the other hand, you don't want to end up off-road with a tire that's not aggressive enough, or you'll be pulling out the winch.
If you decide to put a lift kit on your truck, you need to know exactly what tire size will fit in the wheel well from lock to lock. As you can see with our 6-inch Super Lift, we had to do a little cutting, keep our Baja claws from rubbing when the suspension goes to work. Another thing that's very important is the width. A lot of places you can't run rubber that's wider than the body, so you may have to add some fender flares.
Of course, whenever you go with a taller tire, it changes your gear ratio, and there's all kinds of fancy formulas out there to help you figure this out. But we're going to try to simplify it for you. Now basically, for every inch that you go up in height, your gear ratio gets a tenth taller. For example, if you're going from a 31-inch tall tire to a 35, that's a difference of 4 inches. Now if your stock gear is a 350, that means it's basically been changed to a 310. Now to get your stock performance back, you need to change the 350 to about a 390.
With all that in mind, you have to know what the writing on the sidewall means. Now for a tire in inches, the 35 is the tire height. 12.5 is the section width, not just the tread width. R stands for radial, not rocks. 15 is your rim diameter, and the LT stands for light truck. The M plus S equals mud and snow.
Now metric is where it really gets strained, so you better hold on. The LT means light truck, so we're all right there. The 235 is the width of the tire in millimeters. The 75 is the aspect ratio of the sidewall in relation to the width. Now what that means is the height of the sidewall is 75% of the width of the tire. So when that number goes down, like in a 40 or 50 series tire, the sidewall gets lower like a low-profile street tire. The R means radial. The 15 is the diameter of the rim in inches.
One last thing, when it comes to used tires, they can be a great deal. They can also be a great pain in the backside. So make sure you check the sidewalls for splits, and the tread, that's going to be pretty obvious.
It's come to our attention that a lot of people don't know how to pour antifreeze and oil out of the containers right. Now don't laugh, there is a trick to it. You may have noticed that the antifreeze container has a unique shape to it. Most people grab it and try to pour it from the upright position. This causes air bubbles and usually a big mess. The trick is, turn it on its side and it'll flow right out smooth. Now oil's the same way. The bottle's designed to be poured with the spout on top. That, once again, eliminates the air bubbles and the mess. Which goes to show you, sometimes they do make things to make life a little easier on us.
And now truck gear, parts, tools, and equipment for pickups and sport utilities.
Everybody knows there's nothing worse than the sound of stuff in the bed of your pickup doing a slide job on you. Bullring hits the mark with their retractable tie-downs that hold your cargo right where you want it. The rings hide in the stake pocket until it's time to go to work, when they can be snapped into place and handle a load limit of up to 1,000 pounds. Installation of this steel horse product couldn't be any easier and goes for about 43 bucks a pair.
For you guys that own an old Willys truck or wagon like we do and have searched high and low for a mild lift kit, well, you can call off the search party. Rancho Suspensions has always had the answer with their 2.5-inch lift kit for the old vintage Willys. Now, it comes with all 4 leaf springs and all the parts you'll need to do the job in a couple hours, give or take. It's also one of Rancho's oldest part numbers, which comes with a price from the past, $480 bucks.
Anyone who drives a Ford Power Stroke diesel and does any kind of towing might want to take a look at this item. It's the turbo brake from TurboTech. This setup gives an effective assist to the brake system and reduces strain and excessive wear that's common with heavy load towing, especially downhill. It installs in about an hour and gives you 18 wheels of stopping power. Pulling the reins with the turbo brake for about $500. That's going to do it for Truck Gear. Here's a preview of next week's show.
We'll roll Sinister Silverado back into the truck shop to give it a new exhaust system and do a little power tuning. While we're at it, we'll also put some finishing touches on the exterior of our Chevy truck. After that, we'll take you to Phoenix, Arizona for the first annual Truckin' Nationals before heading back to the shop for some sport truck tire tech. That's all next week on Trucks.
Well, that's going to do it for this week's show. We appreciate you hanging out with us.
Yeah, we look forward to trucking with you again next week.
When did you sneak that on
Oh,
there?
I had to see what it looked like. Where do you see the grill?
Are you going to go with the original cap?
Oh yeah, it's got to have that in it. Original radiator.
How about a blower?
Oh, that high.
Trucks is an RTM production.